Okay, we're live.
I don't think anyone can see. Oh, there we are. Fantastic. Your hair's looking beautiful. Don't worry about it. The camera loves it. The camera loves you.
Thank you, Adrian. That's why I do these things.
That's
It's
hey,
not. It's not the. It's not
that's
the
why we're
political analysis.
37. That's why we're 37 minutes late because you're fixing your hair for 37 minutes.
Let's go with that. Let's go with that. Adrian was beautifying himself, so it was nothing to do with technical issues, and it was not my fault at all. So
No.
yeah. So welcome back to Signal, our weekly podcast at the moment.
Otherwise
this is
known
episode
as
2.
Ben and Ren's wonderful epic podcast, sponsored by AstraZeneca. Just
That's
want to
right.
put that one out
New
there. That's the
sponsor.
alternate name.
New sponsor. We haven't told you about that yet. Maybe we'll get to that later.
Yeah, big news.
But yeah, it's like selling mRNA. It's an easy one to sell. So
Hey,
anyway,
well,
interesting.
I'm on my 25th booster actually.
Are you?
Yeah, we're not meant to talk about this. It's not in the contract for the sponsorship. No, like, this is stupid. I've officially destroyed and wrecked the opening to this podcast, so I'll allow you to continue it formally and properly.
Right. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. So we've got a great show for you today. We've got 3 topics. The first is Adrian's been to Eton, and he wants to report back and let us know what he discovered whilst he was at the heart of the educational establishment for the elite. We cover the local election results and the election results from Scotland and Wales from May 7th, which was Thursday last week, and the political fallout from that. And there's an interesting topic we might cover at the end if we have time, covering the extent or discussing the extent of security service infiltration into the smaller British parties. So rather interesting discussion, possibly at the end of the show. So, Adrian, Eton, tell me about it.
Well, what a place, Ben. What a place. So I wanted to actually bring this up at the end of the last episode because it felt like it segued a bit better from there, because obviously the last thing we talked about in the last episode was Boris Johnson and his questionable decision-making, civilizational scale decision-making. And Boris Johnson, of course, went to Eton College, and he was brought up a few times there for reasons that the representative from Eton decided to stay neutral on. But I did go as part of the George Orwell Society. So if people aren't aware, there is a society that celebrates all things George Orwell. The son of George Orwell actually runs a society, and they do a lot of, as you can imagine, we could call them Orwellian events, although that's not quite the right use of that term. So one of them is that they have a connection to Eton College, of course, because George Orwell was a schoolboy there. He got in on a scholarship because he was only upper middle class. He wasn't upper class. So he got in on, I don't know what scholarship exactly, but now in return, I believe the George Orwell Society offers a George Orwell scholarship. I don't know if it's literally the society that does a scholarship, but somewhere in Eton, there is a scholarship for, I guess, disadvantaged young boys. And it's like one place, and it's connected to George Orwell and his legacy at the college. So anyway, because of that membership, I was able to be very fortunate enough to be given a guided tour of this place with the gang. And the reason I'm bringing it up is just because the way that you said it at the start, Ben, was very eloquent. It was basically looking at the lives of our elites. And the more that I was walking around the place, the more I really felt there was something more than just a one-dimensional, oh, look, they're the elites, they go to the elite school kind of thing. And that's why I wanted to discuss it. The start of the tour, really, apart from being in the courtyard, where it has the statue to Henry VI, the king who founded the college, who originally founded it for priests to study, basically, not for a school, but it ended up being converted into a school shortly after. But the first room we went into was a very sort of like dark and dank kind of room with like these sort of timber slats that like protected the windows, because back in the day there were no actual windows, there's no glass, it was just these timber slats in front that kept the rain and the wind out just about. And It's a classroom which is still technically operated today. It's the oldest, longest serving classroom in the world because it's been operating as a classroom since the 1400s, something like 1410 or 1440 or something like that. And a reward for the children who graduate from the school, they get to carve their name into these timber slats. And so you can look in the sunlight as it's kind of falling on the timber, and you can actually see there will be many names in there who are very famous to our, just like the fate of the world, of our country. But one of them is actually Robert Walpole, which is like the most famous one. So, the guy who was basically the prime minister at a certain point, just de facto. But anyway, the students, their uniform is literally like coattails. Like they wear like the poshest uniform you've seen, and they have certain rankings for they'll have like a bow tie if they've like achieved something at the school or something. And the more I was just listening to what's actually available, they have about 30 or 50 different school subjects, and there's about 30 or 50 different sports that you can partake in. And they still do the same exams that we did, like the AQAs and stuff like that, like GCSEs. They haven't got some special exams. And now bringing this maybe a little bit closer to like a cultural thing, maybe more relevant to the kind of things we talk about. So they have a beautiful chapel there. It was because of how clean it's kept, because it's literally just for schoolboys and the staff only. It's like there's no open to the public, right? It was one of the most beautiful, maybe if not the most beautiful chapel I've been in, probably the most beautiful chapel. But all students have to go to, it's called like prayer or study or something like that. I think it's called chapel in the school informally. But you have to go, I think it's 5 times a week. And that's even if you're Muslim or Jewish or atheist. You don't have to take part and actually pray actively, but you have to go. And that just got me thinking a lot to just how long this tradition lasts, and how even in a place that's as kind of multicultural and woke as Britain, even one of its most absolute elite institutions just says, no, you're going to church, you're going to the chapel. I don't care how Muslim you are or how Jewish you are or whatever. Another thing is the students, they study from 9 till 6 every day, weekdays, 9 till 3 or so on the Saturday. They've got Sunday off. But every evening, if they're not studying or they're not going to one of their clubs, they sit down with their boardmaster, who's the head of their dorm or their house or whatever, like Harry Potter kind of style, and they discuss the issues of the day. So if let's say you've got
that's very good.
It's interesting because you could take the Strait of Hormuz and how it's being closed right now by the obviously American military, by Trump. To this day, on this day, you will have these students who are anywhere between 11 and 15 years old, sat in the evenings after their intense studies, sat with their boardmaster, and their boardmaster will be like, well, what do you boys want to discuss about that? Does someone want to take a side on this? Or I don't know how they talk about it, but it's being instilled in these students from a young age that you need to discuss these things because you are going to be in charge of them. It's like Boris Johnson was there doing the same thing. David Cameron was there doing the same thing. But that was something that I found I'll kind of bring this to a close, obviously, because I kind of gone off on a bit of a monologue. I know you can't add much because you weren't there, but the point is just actually seeing what the elites go through, and knowing that also some of them are literally the sons of sultans or other dynasties or whatever, and just seeing how well lavish, how lavish their education is, but how much they have to work and how much they're kept to a very traditional standard, but also that actually discussing geopolitics and things of the day at such a young age, knowing you're probably going to get involved. Just absolutely astonishing. And the final thing I'll say is that the Eton Library actually has a bust of George Orwell at the entrance. And there's a quote above his head that says, if you don't know how to read, you don't know how to think. And if you don't know how to think, then people will think for you. Right. And of course, it's one of his biggest quotes. And it's just so nice to know that even in a place as sort of tough and elite as Eton as we might see it. I'm just so glad that for any British man to have his like clutches within that school in a sort of irreversible way, I'm glad it's George Orwell.
Right.
So yeah, that's my little sort of way of saying that. So.
Well, that's kind of effectively a little kind of report from Eton. I mean, what's interesting to me is that they're still teaching the national curriculum, right? And the national curriculum is set by the government. Now, so the government gets their kind of oar in direct into even the children of the elite. So their education, where it does differ, is you're highlighting how they get these extracurricular activities like the discussing current affairs. Of course, I wonder how often that happens. It's all very well that they say that happens, but how often does that actually happen? But if they are genuinely discussing it, that's excellent. The other thing is that what's the cost? How much does it cost to go to Eton these days?
It's about I think it was something like 66 grand a year or 66 grand a term or something like that. But they do have the scholarships. And actually, as I said, it's the king. I don't know if it's literally Henry VI, but a collection of the students are in on scholarships that are by decree of the King of England, which is quite extraordinary. And there are scholarship options, but those are like extremely intense to get into. But I'm not trying to like defend them, if you know what I mean. Obviously, it's a place that's just like moneyed up, and they'll have their ways of making money. I'm not here going like, oh, it's actually a poor kids' school. I'm just pointing out that they do have scholarships. And one thing I did just want to say, though, you reminded me, maybe the most important thing I forgot, what you said about do they really discuss geopolitics or to what degree? They have people like big names, people like even like Thomas Tuchel, like the current manager of England. They'll have prime ministers. They'll have like the biggest names in the world for stuff like ambassadors or like in people, I don't know, just think of the biggest, like most important people in the world. They will come to Eton. They will give talks to the students. Those talks will not be recorded. They will be behind closed doors for the students only. And there's not necessarily an obvious guest list of who goes. And the only one I could remember from the two names that he said was Thomas Tuchel, because he was the England manager. I couldn't remember the other person he said. But just the fact that there's a school that the manager of England can turn up, and because a lot of them will do football for PE. So how about have the manager for England turn up to give you a talk? It's like the levels we're talking about. But not only that, but the behind closed doors thing. I was just thinking, like, if these kids are talking about geopolitics with their boardmasters and they're taking subjects with all sorts of languages or all sorts of this and that, who are these like mega elites coming to the school to talk to these kids in private? It's like, what knowledge could you get from that we're not hearing? It's extraordinary.
It would be extraordinary as a child to kind of have that. Effectively, it's that anointment, right? So they're basically saying you are chosen. So there is that element of it, because obviously the children will be aware that this head of state or something or whatever, ex-head of state. And so there's a kind of specialness. But it's almost reassuring that in some bizarre way that they're still being taught the crummy national curriculum. On the other hand, they're still being taught the crummy national curriculum. I mean, my view on education is that it should all be private, and it shouldn't cost. It needn't cost much, because particularly with technology and artificial intelligence, and so high quality education, in my view, should not cost much. But the state does a very bad job of it. But this is maybe a conversation for another time. But so anyway, Adrian, thank you for taking us around the halls of Eton. So that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it was. Indeed, it was.
So the main story tonight is the local elections and the fallout from those. Those were on Thursday last week. I hope you all voted, or at least spoiled your ballot. Reform was the big winner. This was a populist revolt. Reform gained about 1,450 councillors and took control of 14 councils. Labour lost the equivalent, so about 1,500 councillors and a larger number of councils, control of a large number of councils. And the Tories similarly had significant but not as big losses as Labour. And so the story of the day was that effectively what you're seeing is this kind of insurgent party reform smash the two-party system, arguably, and creating kind of multipolar politics in the UK. And of course, even in historically Labour Wales, reform did very well. Of course, Plaid Cymru, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce their name, but they won. But I think Labour were nudged down into third place behind even Reform. So this is a rather significant loss for Labour. This was the biggest story probably that came out of these elections. And I think the picture in Scotland was a little bit more complicated with the SNP continuing to do well. Now, Keir Starmer gave a speech on Monday in response to this because there were rumblings about people trying to take advantage of the situation and kind of challenges his leadership. So I've got a video that maybe with the technical issues, this is probably not going to work, but we'll try it anyway.
It might well do.
We've got a couple of videos, a couple of short clips from his speech. So let's just do the intro.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jay. They were such powerful words. Thank you for that introduction. The election results last week were tough. Very tough. We lost some brilliant Labour representatives. That hurts. And it should hurt. I get it. I feel it. And I take responsibility. But it's not just about taking responsibility for the results. It's about taking responsibility to explain how, as a political and electoral force, we will be better and do better in the months and years ahead. Because we are not just facing dangerous times, but dangerous opponents, very dangerous opponents. This hurts not just because Labour has done badly, but because if we don't get this right, our country will go down a very dark path. So just as I take responsibility for the results, I also take responsibility for delivering the change that we promised, for a stronger and fairer Britain that we must build. I take responsibility for navigating us through a world that is more dangerous than at any time in my life. And I take responsibility for not walking away, not plunging our country into chaos, as the Tories did time and again. Chaos.
So that was the introduction to his speech yesterday morning, and effectively what he's describing is dangerous opponents and a dark path.
Yes.
And this is the framing that the regime will be using to attack Reform, who they are framing as a genuine electoral threat as a result of the outcome in this election. They view this election as being proof that there's an insurgent, fascist adjacent populist force, that's Reform and Nigel Farage, and they're trying to leverage that to bolster their position and in kind of generate enthusiasm to rally behind them as the opponents of that. Adrian, have you got any views on this?
Well, that's an interesting, good way of framing it for sure, but it just makes you think about when you say that this is the message that they're going to take ahead. They've basically gone, okay, now the local elections have turned into the British midterms. That's what they've turned into. And we can get into like why I think that's annoying and ignorant later. But the point is that that's what it's turned into. And the British people have turned around and very frankly gone, we want to stop migration. We want to some degree reverse migration. We want to restore a sense of patriotism in the country. And we don't want to see the sort of denigration of such patriotism. We don't want to see the constant sort of, we want to change not only in terms of the physical security of the country and the security of like the people in it, but they also want to see just quite a fundamental change to culture and attitudes and the psyche of the people. And Labour, or at least Keir Starmer, has gone into that and gone, so you're saying we need to keep calling people Nazis? We'll just, because that worked so well before the local elections. How about we just try that again? Let's just say an actual danger is going to come in. Oh, a dark path. When he said dark path, I was thinking like, well, if the young children of Rotherham and Telford and Oxford and all these places across the world, if they're not on, if those victims of like what's happened from mass migration and a complete culture of like not addressing cultural issues with certain groups, if that's not a dark path, then what is the dark path going to be? And that's before we even talk about reform, because it's very easy to say, yeah, Nigel might be a complete and utter grifter, and yes, he might not fix those issues, but Labour has been tarred with this concept of the uni party now. It's tarred with a fundamental concept of we just cannot keep the economy afloat without a constant influx of people, constantly pushing down the costs of labor and things like that. Ironically, to the point of the Labour Party. So that is generally what I think in terms of that speech. I think it's very, it's a boy who cried wolf situation. As I said, it's like, but no, they're fascists, they're Nazis. Like, but we really mean it this time for real, guys, not the past constant times we've said it. This is the real one. And it's just right. People are looking at him and just going, no, sorry, man. Like, I'm just a normal person who wants to secure the country, Yeah. I'm done with
I mean, it's a very negative, it is negative, completely negative position. And you're right, you're pointing to the negative aspects of the status quo. And he's saying, well, this is, push those to one side for a minute. Look how bad this thing is. If you think that was bad, how about this? And then he's kind of raising the specter of fascism, but not. I don't think he actually used the word fascism. I don't think he ever would, but he would. I'm sure it will be deployed. And also ethno-nationalism. This is the debate that will be occurring in the newspapers. I think we'll be hearing that term a lot. In the run-up to the election.
I just want to say one thing, though, is that one of the reasons why I don't necessarily think he will use the term fascist or Nazi is because, what's her name? Is it Shabana Mahmood?
Yeah.
Who I can't remember the name of the position she's in, but she is on like basically migration watch, isn't she? I just can't remember the name of it. Like whatever secretary.
Yeah, what's her position? I forget.
It's like it's not called
like
him to. Are you looking it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway,
she's the Home Secretary, but MP for Birmingham Ladywood.
Of course, Home Secretary. But I do remember watching a speech by her a few months ago, and I can't remember I never tend to remember exact quotes. I'm more of like a vibes-based guy, you know me. But she actually gave a quite precise, insightful and damning speech on mass migration and what it's doing to the country. And of course people will deflect and just say, oh, she's like a foreigner in charge of blah blah blah, or oh, she's a Muslim, blah blah blah. But when you listen to what she said, she actually understood very presciently the disadvantages of mass migration. Now that's not me going like, oh, Labour actually fundamentally they get it or whatever, but what I mean to say is that like the uni party concept understands the negatives of mass migration and it's aware of them now. And it understands the disadvantages and it would not mind reducing migration to some level, but it's still ultimately stuck with obviously the courts, the international human rights, and also just the economic concept that it has in its head. So I just want to point out what you're saying is that
Well,
I do think Labour has some understanding of how it needs to try and turn back migration, but it's just
Right.
it's lost all trust. It's just lost all trust, and
well, I would frame it, Adrian, that you're right that they have an understanding, right? But they're doing it anyway, and they want it to happen. It's a deliberate action. So if you know something's going, you know something is happening, you are in control of the levers that affect that outcome, and yet you don't move those levers. You deliver those outcomes, and you don't correct them, or you don't do anything to mitigate them, then you are culpable. These people, but these people do understand it, because, of course, it doesn't take a genius to understand what mass migration does, and particularly certain types of mass migration do to the native societies that pre-exist the new arrivals. And certain types of mass migration are deeply, deeply corrosive to society at every level. And we've seen that. It's not a recent phenomenon. We've seen it with the migration from Pakistan, rural Pakistan, in the 1950s and 60s, and the effects, the long-lasting and continuing effects that had in the towns that those people settled in. And we're seeing it continue with the subsequent waves of mass migration, and most recently the Boris wave, which is my pet peeve. And so, of course, they do understand it. I don't think that's particularly unknown. I think what some people do think is that perhaps they are incompetent or lack the power to do anything about it. And again, I would push back on that, because they have the power. In the UK, Parliament is sovereign. It can do literally anything it can pass in Parliament. And of course, both Boris and now Labour had large majorities, and therefore they can, they're immensely powerful. They have the ability. Now you mentioned external treaties and signatories to international law. Again, that does not need to propagate. That can be changed. It can be ignored, and it can be overturned. So they're not bound by it.
No, I think what they're bound to is, one, the corrupt elements which have already got into these parties, like Connor Tomlinson has talked about in great detail. Like when the actual people from the foreign countries, like the ones who are quite powerful within government in other countries, or they have their connections, like use it for barefaced corruption, similar to the gangs and like the innate corruption in smuggling. But beyond that, it's also when you're this like managerial uni party, you're trying to balance all the plates at the same time, because you're just because it just feels like you're just trying to keep the world running, just kind of try and keep it trucking, really. And so basically, Keir Starmer, basically, in a word, his migration policy is migration is great and it's bad. You know what I mean? It's literally just like a complete and utter contradiction. Like it's a walking contradiction. Like they have to sell to people why migration's unacceptable and why it's great at the same time. That it's like talking. It's like a Janus. It's like they've got two faces.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, migration is a big topic and a separate topic in and of itself. And as I understand it, at the latest count, 4 minor cabinet secretaries have resigned their posts. I mean, this is the kind of little trickle of the after effects of Thursday's vote. And so the media is hyperventilating about Starmer needing to resign. I strongly suspect he won't. It makes for good news copy to suggest that maybe he might have to.
Sorry to interrupt, but I walked into like a post office earlier today, and for some reason there was a table in the middle of the place that had all of the day's newspapers on top of it. Literally, I could send you the photo. Like all 12 of the newspapers just had like the same stock image of Keir Starmer looking absolutely screwed. You know what I mean? And I was like, I wonder if something's happened in the news recently, because they are absolutely gunning for this. Like all of the newspaper, it feels like some kind of like whatever you call like a fifth column or something like that. Just all being like, he has to go. All the newspapers like.
Well, what I would say is that this is a pattern that the news media, in my experience, tends to follow, which is they tend to create these kind of stories, these narratives that the outcome is fairly certain, known in advance, but yet they cast doubt and uncertainty around that in order to, I don't know what the purpose
Sell
quite
copies.
is.
Sell copies.
Right, sell
you just said
newspapers.
it. You just said it. You basically said it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
how
right.
they do it.
So yeah, I mean, my analysis is that these people are nobodies. But the biggest nobody is who's resigned is Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley. But the other ones are just unknowns.
So Jess Phillips has resigned.
Yes, but of course, a resignation is just a resignation from a minor position in the party.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It doesn't mean that she's not an MP anymore. It just means that she's no longer.
She's had a little whinge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's fair.
So this is the fallout for Labour, and the suggestion is that Starmer might have to go. I strongly don't believe that there's any momentum behind that, and we've just seen Starmer's opening volley in his speech. Let me just show another piece from Starmer's speech.
And I'm sorry, but I need to take a bit of a detour on this, because I want to remind you what Nigel Farage said about Brexit. He said it would make us richer. Wrong. It made us poorer. He said it would reduce migration. Wrong. Migration went through the roof. He said it would make us more secure. Wrong again. It made us weaker. He took Britain for a ride, and unlike the Tories, actually, who at least had to face up to it, he just fled the scene. And now he'll talk about almost anything other than the consequences of the one policy he actually delivered. Because he's not just a grifter, he is a chancer.
So in this, Keir Starmer is effectively laying blame at Nigel Farage for the catastrophe of the last few years, possibly even suggesting that the Boris wave and many of the other economic outcomes of the past few years have been directly related to Nigel Farage, despite Nigel Farage not actually being in power. Adrian, have you got any thoughts on this?
It reminds me, I was reading a book earlier at lunchtime, and it was talking about, in this book, it was talking about the sort of the decay of culture in Europe and in Greece, whilst Rome and America were growing beside it. It's a big book themed on that. And one of the things it talks about was how in the Greek era, around the time of Plato and Aristotle, the concept of rhetoric started to become like a study, like hugely became studied. But the issue with that was that people were a lot more focused on how you said things as opposed to what was being said. And when I listened to this, that Keir Starmer is saying, it's like all of the major points about Farage, apart from the concept that he's a deserter, that's fine. He certainly found clever ways of stepping out the way from actual power, but you could argue that was in order for him to retain his ability, because if he'd got into a position of power and it had collapsed, then the concept of Brexit or whatever may have never happened. But the wider point is just, to what you're implying, is leaving the EU made us poorer and things like that, even though it was the Tories who were in charge. It was entirely up to them. It was their thing, and whatever decisions they made were generally by people who were reluctant to leave and so on. But the reason I bring up that rhetoric thing is because I'm just so absolutely blackpilled to the concept that like people as influential as Keir Starmer just go up on stage and write something or say something rather that is just like, it's just this empty, hollow thing that gets people to think a certain way to their own biases already. It's like, I would just as much as this sounds like obviously a bit irrelevant, but I would just rather sit there and read a book about what happened or read a long editorial or something about what happened, as opposed to just have some guy like shovel platitudes into my bloody ears. Do you know what I mean? I know that's not directly to what you're talking about, but it just...
but what you're saying, Adrian, is that you want to hear the truth articulated to you. What I would say is that, because you want some facts, but what I would say is, of course, this is politics, and politics is not grounded in facts. It's grounded in populist emotion and the demos and the crowd and the mob, and so it's all about, and the way that humans communicate and understand things, particularly on an aggregate level, is through stories. And so what Keir Starmer is doing here, and I know you know this, but I'm just presenting my thesis. He's crafting a narrative, right? So the narrative is that the insurgent party that he's framing as a threat, it's their fault, and he's not even naming the party really. He's just naming the man, and that kind of makes sense because Nigel Farage does and has and continues to make the party really a vehicle for himself rather than a vehicle for a wider movement that's got an ideological core, and that's a weakness of him. So he's crafting that narrative, and it's deep. And like you say, for anyone who understands what's happened over the past few years, where Brexit, which was asked for by the demos via a democratic vote, on the basis, in part, of immigration restrictionism, was completely subverted. And so the outcomes were a choice made by people like Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer is now blaming Nigel Farage for those outcomes. So yeah, it is a bit ironic. It's a bit hypocritical. It's a bit.
What's also particularly hypocritical about it is that it crafts this narrative that in the EU, migration was controlled oh so well, and at least we had a plan, or at least we had a deal with the French, or at least it was just Europeans coming in. And now we've left the EU, and it's broken it all apart, and that perfect migration system that was so great, like Australia's with the point system. And I even remember, like, a friend of mine who is very pro-Remain, still is. Sometimes we get into politics a bit, and he'd sound pretty clued up on these things. I remember him saying about, I can't remember what sort of convention or where it came from specifically, but it was one of these constitutional documents of the EU. And it was something like Article 5 or something like that. And the idea was that if a person has migrated into the EU, but then hasn't found a job within 6 months, then they have to leave. And he was telling me this, saying like, you're saying that the EU is like mega woke and anybody can just walk in and whatever. Well, actually, there's a treaty right here that says in 6 months you got to leave. And I was there. I was like, I don't know about that one. I'll have to read that one. But then I thought, like, how was that enforced during the migration crisis when Libya collapsed? It wasn't enforced. This is the major concern. It's like the platitudes can be written into these conventions or constitutions or whatever, but if it's not enforced, then there is no point to it. It's just a piece of paper. And again, going back to this narrative that, like, Keir Starmer is saying like Brexit caused migration to increase. It's like you're not even getting anywhere close to the truth. Like you're just saying things like this happened so that, or like some kind of insane like correlation causation fallacy, So it's just, it's irritating. It's like you go from 1 minute having this Article 5 that says, people have to leave in 6 months, and then you have Angela Merkel saying like, okay, 200,000 have to go here this month, 100,000 have to go here this month. You're taking them this month. Oh, you won't take them here. Here's your fine every day. It's like, right. God damn,
It's rhetoric. Yeah. It's lies, basically, like lying by omission. But yeah. So the other story, of course, is that Restore, which is the newest insurgent party, they stood in Norfolk and won 9 county council seats and 1 borough council seat, so 10 seats in total. And these were all the seats that they stood for. And they had a huge vote share, 46% of the vote on average in the wards that they stood. So a significant win for Restore. And I've got a little piece of video from Rupert Lowe just discussing the win.
I think a historic win in Great Yarmouth for Great Yarmouth First. And what we've done, I think, and we should give credit, first of all, to the people in Great Yarmouth, the voters who believe in what we're doing. They're fantastic people. We had to go east to find real people. They've supported what we're doing. They can see what we're doing. We asked 9 people who've been in business, who've been in other professions, who've actually contributed to their local community, all from Great Yarmouth. And they were from outside politics. So the model has been proved now in Great Yarmouth. And these 9 people, brave, put themselves forward, campaigned along with us, and we have effectively shown what model locally can work, which we can then roll out nationally.
So what he's saying is that the strategy of Restore, and they weren't campaigning under that name. They were campaigning under Great Yarmouth First. And I think they might have even been independents, because I'm not sure Great Yarmouth First is a party. But you, as an independent, you can write 6 words. If you don't, as an independent, you can write 6 words to associate with your candidacy. And I suspect they probably all wrote Great Yarmouth First in that little box. So what he's saying is that he's proven a model, and that which they can roll out across the country, which is interesting because, of course, in some ways he's right. Restore have proven that they can deploy a ground game in one location, which is the home seat of Rupert Lowe. And that's not nothing, that's something. And there was a huge amount of enthusiasm. They got hundreds of people to turn up and help out, by the sound of it, with the grassroots activism. And they got a lot of votes. But the question is, how does this translate into the much more important elections? And of course, this raises a wider question. What is the meaning, the implication for national governance of these elections? Because there's definitely a psychological distinction to be made between local elections and a general election. And historically, and other types of elections, like, for example, historically, we used to have European elections. And in European elections, I think UKIP consistently won, right? Except UKIP never ever got any real representation domestically. So there's a key distinction between different election types. And I think there is a strong danger of reading too much into this. Rupert Lowe does have a strange charisma. He's been deeply wronged publicly by Nigel Farage and Reform. He is a self-identified Tory, but a strong populist, and it was deeply aligned with the Brexit movement, which was, Great Yarmouth was one of the strongest constituencies for Brexit in the country. So he has a history in the constituency of popularity. So I strongly suspect, and of course, in every other constituency, he won't have that. So I just really doubt that this is going to really mean that much. It means something, but I think they have a hugely difficult task ahead of them, and I'm not confident that they're going to win. Rupert Lowe is suggesting that they're going to win. I just don't think that can happen. Well,
yeah, a lot of great points there. I agree with you in the fundamental that it's being overblown. I don't think it's useful kind of denying that. If you're someone who doesn't think it's overblown, if you think he is going to win in 2029 based on kind of this, then you are someone who has been absolutely cuckolded by your algorithm, and you need to go touch grass. Basically, that's a fact of the matter, isn't it? It's true. It's like if you're someone who looks at that and goes, right, 2029 is happening, Rupert Lowe's right, you either need to touch grass or you need to like wake up. But that's not something which is that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, because, and I know it sounds a bit like my examples aren't so strong, but I mean, well, actually, I mean, for one, I was going to say, if you look at Donald Trump, like Trump didn't run for the first time in 2015. He'd ran before, he'd done various testers and things like that across the country. He will have gotten however many votes. Similar things with what you said about, UKIP being in this place where they get voted in the elections at sort of like specialisms. Like this is a local election. It's a bit like the midterms in America. It's a thing which is more often than not kind of done by what you could call enthusiasts. And probably what made this vote so special is that it attracted probably non-enthusiasts who wanted to stick it to Labour. So yeah, we are still dealing with something where, as you say, Rupert Lowe is like he's known by a certain group of people. He's adored by those people, presumably. There's a lot of confidence behind him. And there's probably also, to a point I think I mentioned to you before, that like there's probably a sort of like an ethnic enclave element to this as well. There's probably Yarmouth is probably overwhelmingly like, maybe it's people who were like white flight from London or something like that. I don't know exactly. Or it's just people who just aren't like.
No, I don't think it is. Great Yarmouth is I think is a seaside town.
Yeah.
It was conservative in the late 1990s and the 1990s and 1980s. Then it was New Labour. And then it, as soon as Brexit came along, it flipped to Tory again.
Wasn't it also a place that was getting hit by the boat crossings a lot? I feel like it might.
So because I don't think so because it's not geographically in the right location for that.
No, but, okay.
It's in Norfolk.
Okay, that's fair.
North Sea. They're not coming across the North Sea.
Okay, well, I made a few assumptions there, but anyway, my point is that like what I was really trying to say is like with these specialist votes and things like that, you're right, it's probably not a place for the boat crossings, but I'm just trying to say that it's probably a matter of consolidation what is happening, because just because an issue like migration for some people or economics for some people might be an extremely pressing thing where they want to sort it now. We need to sort it now or else, or we need to sort it by now or else we'll, whatever. The fact of the matter is that the political system is built for stability, like fundamentally. And so it takes time to build up something which is strong enough to actually enact political change. And even with the Brexit thing, UKIP wasn't built up strong enough because it didn't take a majority of seats in Parliament. Peter Hitchens made that clear. He talked about that with Restore Britain, it's probably, if it ever becomes something where a majority of MPs are in there, you're probably looking at least a decade or two if it manages to grow. And reform right now is like sprayed with like fertilizer, really. It's something very artificial that's like boosting it. So that's why that's a bit different. That
we should look at Restore as a much more long-term project. Is that what you're saying?
I think it would have to be. I think I don't know how it could come about like that quickly, like wildfire, and that's because, as I say, I know I got it wrong in terms of like the location of Great Yarmouth, and in terms of like it being like I'm not right about that kind of thing about fleeing from London, maybe, but it seems very, as you're kind of implying, it's very insular. The people there know him really well, so they all went for that. It's that, and it's not spread in the way that like the Labour movement will have grown over decades or whatever. So.
Well, I would say that this cuts to the heart of what Restore actually is, and Restore needs to define itself in such a way that it distinguishes itself from Reform, but not only Reform, the rest of the other parties, because of course those are the competition that it has. And I just want to post one short clip from the same interview from Rupert Lowe.
But the point I always get accused of is, oh, you're going to split the vote. No, we're not splitting the vote. What we're doing is we're bringing people back to politics who've given up on the way in which Britain is governed. And I increasingly find myself looking at Starmer and looking at the Labour front bench and looking at what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years, well, really since Tony Blair. And I think, how have the British people been hoodwinked by this system that basically serves them up a slate of people from parties that they don't respect, they don't like, they don't want to vote for? So these people have actually left voting. And as you know, in the last election, I think the turnout was only 59%. As I call it, Keir Starmer's landslip election victory. That's what it was. It's wafer thin, actually, if you did.
So he's, as you can see, Rupert Lowe is articulate and he understands, or he's grasping at, in my view, the correct direction. Because, of course, we can learn from Donald Trump that Donald Trump won the flyover states, and that handed him the victory. He didn't get a popular win, but he got a win because he got the flyover states. And these are the disenfranchised. So these are not, Great Yarmouth was New Labour. It flipped between Tory in the 1980s and 90s to New Labour for 10, 15 years, then Tory again, as soon as this kind of populist dissent started to bubble up with Brexit. These are the disenfranchised. These are the forgotten people. They're not wealthy. They live in a seaside town that's not seen upward mobility. And Rupert Lowe, I think, is right to target these people. Exactly right. And although they haven't come up with many strategies, right? So the most fleshed out strategy is immigration. And their immigration strategy was excellent. They've tweaked it, and I'm not quite sure. I'm not up to speed what the tweaks have done, but I think it substantially remains in place. So their criticism of ILR, I think they propose to abolish ILR. They say they want to undo the Boris wave, and they are incredibly kind of forceful on this kind of idea of mass deportation. So they've got a very robust, when compared to the other parties, immigration policy, and that's good. That's deeply appealing to the forgotten people, the disenfranchised, the people who have worked hard all their lives, haven't got much to show for it, and now they're seeing a complete transformation before their very eyes of the country, which is an erosion of the society, which contributes to the wealth that they perceive. Because, of course, wealth is not all about money. It's about quality of life and whether you live in a high trust society and the state of your environs and things like that, the people around you. So I think he's right to focus on that, but I just don't think, I agree with you, that, first of all, they're not distinguishing themselves from the other parties successfully in a clean way, a way that's going to attract the electorate. And we can come back to that in a second, exactly what they're doing. And, they're just tiny. Now, I know they've got the backing of Elon Musk, but they haven't communicated a vision yet. They've been around for a few months, and I suppose they could have communicated that vision. They haven't. Although Lowe is effectively communicating a kind of small state, what he perceives to be a small state, the Thatcherite vision of Britain, which doesn't really align itself with the forgotten people.
What you're talking about is basically just a repeat of the story of Nigel Farage's conundrum. Really, if you think about it, like Nigel is like meant to be quite obviously sort of like a Thatcherite, but then on the other hand, he's got to make these. He's making this argument about Brexit, about leaving the EU, like on a migration platform, basically. And he wants to be a Thatcherite. Like, he wants to make different trade deals with different parts of the world and stuff like that. And like, in terms of being competitive, and feels that the EU is fundamentally uncompetitive and is like dragging people into a block. I mean, look at the Greek financial crisis and like the monetary system. It's like very much like, you know, just like a blob that you're dragged into. But he realized that as much as he might want to stand in the gold elevator with Donald Trump and all this kind of stuff and hark back to Thatcher and money and stuff, he knows that he has to say like platitudes about the NHS, because there is a huge mass of people. I mean, think of the red bus, right? A huge mass of people must absolutely see the NHS stay intact. You know, like millions and millions and millions of people must see it like that. You know, they do see it like that. They're like, it has, you know, we have to keep it intact. And so Nigel was always balancing those kinds of things. And I think Restore, they will be very much thinking deeply about, now that they've got a bit of a base, they'll have got a lot of donations. They have like a kind of a recommendation from Elon Musk, but it's nothing that explicit apart from a few retweets and stuff. They're going to start hitting the same things that Nigel was hitting, and they're going to have to decide, how do we take it? And I think the current strategy is to not talk very much about things that aren't immigration, be implicitly but obviously a single issue party, and then use their position on immigration as the roots of the tree that is the rest of the policy, right? It's like they will try to argue everything. They'll say like, you know, reducing immigration will take pressure off the NHS, so we don't have to worry too much about where that's going because there'll be less pressure on it. Or like, you know, reducing immigration will like reduce crime, so we don't have to like say too much about what we're going to do about the police budget, and so on and so forth, right? I think that is probably how they will go about it, because I think as soon as they try to take an actual position, like Rupert Lowe's actual feelings, or the feelings of like the reactionary rights with people like Connor Tomlinson and Charlie Downs, or whether they try to take something else, it'll just like have very different opinions on that kind of thing. So,
yeah. I mean, if Farage moderated dramatically after 2024, then Restore popped up, issued all kinds of hardline statements about immigration, and Reform matched them. They matched them pretty much at every step of the way. They haven't gone as far. The Reform is still much more moderate on immigration, in my view. But Restore, therefore, have proven a model of dragging the Overton window successfully and forcing a response from Reform. So that in itself has proven that Restore has a model, has a purpose. But in order to actually win, which I know you don't think they will, but the two men on the screen here think that they have a chance of doing it. What Restore actually has to do, it has to distinguish itself from Reform, which is a party that's aping it at every step of the way. So if they come up with a immigration policy that's saying that they're going to repeal ILR, then Reform will do exactly the same, and then you're stuck. No one's going to vote for Restore in the general election because Reform have articulated the same policy.
But that's the game. That's the game. That's what David Cameron did when UKIP was like stalking him, you know, from the bushes. He went, okay, fine, we'll have a referendum, but I'm going to say pro-Remain, and that would have never happened if Big Man Nige wasn't stalking David Cameron, right? I mean,
right.
And that, but the thing is that because Nigel Farage was ginning it up, it actually it revived feelings of that in the Tory party that did exist. And it kind of like brought about a conversation, like similar to what happened with, I can't remember the exact date. It's like the July Revolution in this country, when like MPs weren't representing the working people because of the kind of the districting and gerrymandering, and it was like enough pressure caused it to become centre frame. It's like it's just another thing of that, and but does that mean that the future is going to be that Restore is going to push on like the full-on crazy like remigration stuff, and then Reform just goes, okay, fine, take in the policy, wins the majority, and doesn't do it, or half-asses it, or something?
Well, I think reform will go as far as it can within the bounds of what the electorate believe to be reasonable, and that will not include using the word remigration. I'm sure of it. But what will happen is that reform will find a position on the playing field within the Overton window that satisfies, or what's the word? Satisfies the people who would otherwise vote for Restore, and that leaves Restore in a very precarious position, because of course UKIP was deeply unsuccessful electorally domestically, and that's because it served a useful function, dragging the Overton window, but that was about it. So what you've got here, but that strategy made sense because the attack was against one of the big two. It was against the Tories. What you've got here is an insurgent party running attacks principally against another insurgent party, which is Reform. And so what you had in Great Yarmouth was Restore denying Reform overall control of that council, which is interesting. So you're effectively kind of, the strategy is a little bit less clear cut because you're kind of attacking people who are half allied with you. But and the other thing to say is that, of course, Nigel Farage has dragged Reform to a kind of bizarre version of the Tory party. It's kind of started collecting ex-Tories like Pokemon cards.
Before, I just want to say though, before you kind of make a point like that, kind of like sticking it to the actual like framing of the results, is like, what Rupert Lowe has said here is like, we're pulling out disenfranchised voters. Like, I'm pretty sure that that's what Reform voters will be, right? I don't understand when he says like, oh, our edges are disenfranchised voters. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pull out that mystery shadow 40% of people who didn't vote or whatever, or the 60% that didn't vote or whatever. But I'm pretty sure like that's what Reform. I don't think I'm wrong there, right? Like the whole point. I mean, like if people got up off their asses to vote for Brexit, and they were people who never normally voted, but it was finally something that spoke to them, then it's Mr. Brexit running Reform. And it's also, I was talking about this with someone like at work, it's like culturally, did you see like Nigel Farage going to Ipswich Town Football Club? No, okay, so you might have missed this, but basically Nigel did his campaigning where he visited Ipswich Football Club and stuff like that. And as part of that, they've produced a Reform shirt that's called like Reform FC or something like that. And it's literally like the Reform marketing brand on a like polyester or whatever it would be football style shirt. So you look like you're wearing a football top, but it's just a Reform top. Like those are the levels of normie that he is getting into. He's literally getting into, they like the football, I make the football shirt, he wears the football shirt, I do the vote. You know what I mean? Like literally those levels of normie.
Party.
Like, and so, but what I mean is like, that's square, like Rupert Lowe is saying, oh, we're going to go for the disenfranchised voter. Like, what's more disenfranchised than like the bloody bloke or the woman who goes to the football of me wife simple as wear the football shirt out for dinner? It's like, this is just like, I don't know. I just don't know.
I agree. So what you're saying is that the overlap, the ideological overlap between those two parties is so great that they will just cannibalize each other. And of course that is true. And perhaps Rupert Lowe is being a little bit disingenuous here, because of course that might be part of the actual aim of the party. Because of course he's got this beef with Nigel Farage over how he was hand treated. So no, Restore, unless they develop a new politics, and with Elon Musk backing, they could do that. All right. Rupert Lowe is more electable than Nigel Farage. He's more sympathetic, and he's definitely more sympathetic to the Tory base, which is very important.
Hmm.
So they could construct a party that was an electoral force. They could do that. But as far as I can tell, they're not doing that. So Restore, as it's currently constructed, is kind of an odd thing. It's two things at the same time. It's Lowe's Thatcherism, and it's not actually Thatcherism. Some people say, well, the criticism that he's a Thatcherite is invalid, and they're kind of right. Lowe has described himself as a libertarian, right? So he's actually quite aligned with my politics. A lot of what he says is aligned with what I think. It's like a pragmatic version of my politics. So he could. So there's that. That's one side of it. It's kind of like libertarian adjacent, free marketeering, cynicism of statism, which I love. And then on the other hand, you've got Charlie Downs, Brackpool. I forget his first name. Lewis Brackpool, perhaps, and Connor Tomlinson, and there's kind of effectively this Zoomer ethnat wing of the party that now they may not be self-described ethnats, I don't know, but they are continually emitting ethnat dog whistles, and so you've got this bizarre hybrid that actually is cut along generational lines, and then you've got also other minor figures like Orla Minahane, she's a much more minor figure in the party.
Well, the generational line is a very good way of saying that, because I know I brought up Janus, the god of two faces, before. I think it makes you wonder what would be wrong innately with Restore running a genuine like two-faced strategy, where on the older demographic vote, you just run the classic kind of Tory-esque thing. It's like, it's good to follow like the old Thatcherite stuff. It's good to follow the free market stuff. It's good to do like, the Tory stuff, the kind of stuff that Kemi was doing with the whole like ending stamp duty or whatever. Just run that kind of stuff that's very like, like, what's it like? Milk toast kind of whatever, like, oh yes, we will reduce the taxes and blah blah. Whereas at the very exact same time, you have people like Connor Tomlinson and Charlie Downs running the reactionary right wing. We are going for all of the young men. We're doing the divisive stuff. We're posting the memes. We're doing the crazy videos. We're having people say really, really risky shit, and we're going to go for the absolute capture, of the. But the problem is that never the two will those sides meet. That would be the concept of that strategy. It would be like never will the two meet.
Right, but you could do that. So in 2016 that happened with Trump. But the way that evolved with Trump is that you had the very online right with Pepe memes and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. He will not divide us and all this stuff going on 4chan and things like that. These people were not associated in any formal sense with the GOP.
Yeah.
What you've got here is the official spokesperson, Charlie Downs, and the head of investigations, whatever that is. It's the guy who's gatekeeping recruitment. He's the vetting guy, Lewis Brackpool, issuing ethnat adjacent dog whistles. Now, so it's too close. It cannot work because that opens up the actual party directly to allegations of ethno-nationalism, and that's easily an election loser. So they could, so Restore is a funny thing. It's got this weird hybrid. It's got this slightly charismatic, angry older guy, Lowe, and you've got these much younger ethno-nationalist adjacent Zoomers. It's very, very strange. It's not an electorally winning strategy. Also, there's this kind of Christian angle to it that they've kind of diminished over time. So they're not going to win. It's moot anyway, and they will drag some grassroots support from Reform. they had an opportunity to grab a lot of it. I think with the kind of increasingly racialized rhetoric, they will grab less of it. So I think that they're on a trajectory to effectively be a really, really quite a minor party.
Well, I guess time will tell, won't it? I think for now, I think we've basically, in terms of the wider kind of narrative, or however this is all. I don't mean narrative as in like a theory. I just mean how it's going. 2026, the movie, I guess, is we've kind of seen our major things, like our major plays happening, reform taking a huge amount from Labour or from wherever, obviously like Labour falling apart in Wales and so on. I think we just have to say, look, Restore have delivered something which is awesome in its own way. It's not the biggest thing ever, but we're in reality, I think. And yet all we can do is just see if either A, it's a strategy they're actually running, or B, they don't have a strategy yet. And so that would be all that I'd say to that. The only last thing I want to say is, to keep extremely brief before we move on. One, I can't stand the fact that these are treated as midterms. I find it irritating. I find it very ignorant. Like when I made my choice, I learned about what each individual candidate was going to do, and I voted for the two people who mentioned the things that were the most important to me. And those things were crime and restoring the high street in some kind of way. That those are probably the two most important things to me out of many of the issues. So I voted for the two people who talked about it in public somehow. The second thing was, as I said to you on WhatsApp, this is the first time in my life that my vote has literally made a difference, in the fact that I did not vote for someone, and because I did not vote for someone, they did not get like basically the one vote they needed to either like call a recount because they got the same votes as someone else, or to in other ways, like give them like something up. So that was kind of hilarious to look at the results and go, oh my God, that one vote gap in this situation that's kind of changed that. It's like if I'd made the other decision that I was thinking about. So that was cool. And I just want to share that because it's nice to bring things back to like, what is our actual place in this, as opposed to just kind of sat on the sideline like those two old sarcastic Muppets who sit in the nosebleeds in the theater. It's nice to bring things back to where do we actually, as you and I or whatever, kind of stand in this thing. So
okay, all right, well let's just briefly move on. The final topic I just wanted to cover briefly, if I can add it to the stage.
Do we have any super chats, by the way?
What do you think? So,
well, do we have anybody? Have we not got it set up so people can just write something? I guess not.
Actually, they can. They can write. They can write if they want to. They are able.
We got a message from Happy Man 2119 for $20 who says, "Release the Epstein files." Well, hey, the Democrats will sort you out, my friend.
Done. So I just wanted to cover this. It piqued my interest, right? So this is just.
By the way, are our webcams meant to be off, or?
Oh, would you like to be on screen? There we go.
Of course, I'm the one who brings in the. I'm the one who brings in the. I got the face. Everyone loves me. Anyway, I'm going off on one. You go back to what you were talking about.
So this is just some strange account on X, and the suggestion that he's making, which he continually makes, is that Restore have been infiltrated by the security services. And I just wanted to briefly, let's not make this a big chat, but just consider this, because of course the security services do have a long history of infiltrating dissident groups. His thesis is that this all starts with a video that's related to, I think, a anti-vax protest where an associate, like vaguely tied to Tommy Robinson, was seen to be communicating with a police officer. And the suggestion that, there are entire account there are many accounts that kind of dedicate themselves to trying to identify undercover police officers in these kind of protests because they exist. I don't think it's. I'm not becoming Alex Jones to suggest that undercover police officers exist in protests on hot button issues, and this is the footage, and you can see. I mean, there's no audio. We don't need to change the audio, but we can see that effectively we've got a man here who's basically nodding and effectively waving to the police officer. That man was then identified and tied to subsequent activism, and he's circled here, and then of course you've got Charlie Downs in that same activist group. This was a mayoral campaign. He's in an activist group associated with the ex-girlfriend of Connor Tomlinson, I think that might be, and Lewis Brackpool's involved in the sense that he basically engaged this account and suggested that he was trying to explain away this behavior here, and effectively connecting himself to this man as well.
So just to get this straight, this guy who's over there in the sort of mid ground, who's just walked off of the screen, he is the supposed informant. And the idea is that in this video, he's pretending to tip a cap towards a police officer to tell the police officer, I'm part of your, insurgency or whatever. I'm part of mission intelligence or whatever you want to call it. Am I getting that right?
Right. The theory is that in any policing situation like this, there will be both uniformed and undercover police officers. We have a uniformed police officer here wearing a cap, right? That's obvious, right? That guy is very obviously a police officer. We also have this man here who is looking directly at him from it can be deceptive, but it appears to be the case, waving at him with his fingers and his hands, and the police officer is responding and waving back. Okay.
Play it again. Play it one more time.
Okay. This is looks like they've slowed it down.
So he's doing that. The other guy's tapping his hat.
Now, the reason that they might be doing that is to say, is everything okay? Because, of course, if they're both police officers, or if they're both on the same team for gathering intelligence about either an individual or just the situation generally, then there will need to be a comms channel between them. And of course, so you could explain, you could provide a reason for two members of effectively the security services, one an overt police officer, one a plainclothes police officer. It's not unreasonable to suggest that they might establish communication in that way.
But it's also not unreasonable to say this guy's just looking around, he's a bit disorientated, or he might want to know the security, he might want to show that he's being respectful, he might just see a police officer and look at him and nod at him. I mean, like if I walk down the street and I make eye contact with a police officer, obviously apart from like putting out my spliff on, no, I'm just joking. Apart from like whatever, I might just look at a police officer and like nod or tip my cap just because I'm just being polite. And like now the closest I could say, which makes this a little bit different, is his nod does seem to be quite like, it's a bit deeper than just kind of acknowledging someone, maybe. But
yeah, so I don't want to litigate this. Yeah. I don't want to litigate this because we don't know, right?
Yeah, we don't know.
That's what I'm trying to say. There's a theory. Okay, we're not going to get to the bottom of it. It's possible. It's also possible it's not true. Okay, so but what I'd like to just discuss with you very briefly is this raises the interesting possibility, because if there was a group that was to be infiltrated by the security services, Restore would be an ideal candidate for it. And these people who are associated with this man, so Charlie Downs, Lewis Brackpool, Connor Tomlinson, are the ethnic side of the party. So I'm just raising that.
Yeah, okay. So just before we go on though, because is this like a whole thread? Is there like more evidence, or is it just that video?
Oh, there's countless things, little tidbits, but I'm not. I don't want to. I don't know whether it's true or not. Even if we were to go through the thread, Adrian, I'm not sure we'd get to the bottom of it. But
I don't want to get to the bottom of it. I just want to see, what else. Because what I want to do is I want to differentiate between like a schizo post and something which is actually built up. That's all. That's just all that I want to kind of differentiate, really. Because the other thing is that like you've got all sorts of other angles to this. You've got like, I mean, obviously just thinking like out loud or outside the box, but could this be a psyop set up by mission intelligence to cause a fracture artificially?
Yes.
Could it just be like sort of a foot, like, just pinning something on someone to watch them? Like, I saw like, but there's all sorts of interesting techniques that, I mean, like, remember what I said about when someone shared with us, it was that picture of Rupert Lowe on the gallows as like an AI image that the Rebirth Party put out. Do you remember that? It was something like, no, you definitely, I definitely remember you saw it because, or maybe actually, I swear I shared it with you, or maybe someone else did, but it was this AI generated image of Rupert Lowe, like in the gallows, like hanging, and it was produced by the Rebirth Party. And they were trying to say Rupert Lowe is just another, Thatcherite. Like we need a proper like revolution, National Socialist style. Like we can't keep believing these capitalists. It was the same rhetoric with the guy that you've debated before. And I just remember looking at that and seeing all the people writing how this is absolutely horrific and how could like Rebirth post such a thing. And the first thing that came to my head was, has someone infiltrated the party to post something that dumb and reckless and dangerous? Like,
exactly.
Not because I don't believe in the freedom to say it, but I was just there like, that is how you not just destroy a party in terms of showing something that's like screwed up, but also causing a massive fracture of your own loyalists. It's like it was a hugely, and I just, so again, it's just, it is interesting that you've pointed this out. Why, I guess the wider issue is just keeping an eye out on these kinds of techniques, but be open-minded as to what the techniques can be without being paranoid. Because the last point I'll make is the Lush, the soap brand, like the first ever place obviously opened up in Poole, like, and they had an ad campaign a few years ago where they showed, they raised awareness of government spies sneaking into animal rights groups. Because animal rights groups would like go on and like, interfere with factories, or like they'd even like, just do like some stuff that's violent, some less so. And so Lush was dead against government operatives coming in and being moles in these organizations. So they put up adverts making people aware, like, look, the government is sneaking into animal rights campaigns and stuff. And that caused like such a like an unusual backlash. But it was interesting to see just how much that like ruffled people's feathers. And it made me think, like, by God, by Lush pointing that out, like points out something that people just don't think about, but it is a real issue, or however you interpret it, right? So yeah, no, it's an interesting thing to look at, and we'll have to find out if he really is a spy or not. But I don't know. It seems a bit silly to me.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, that's a wrap, Adrian. Thank you very much for your contributions tonight, and thank you to everybody who's been watching. And we'll be back next week. So thank you.
Yeah, and whoa, before we go off, you see the name down there? That's Ren Summoner. That's the YouTube channel. We need to get my subscriber count up to 1,571. Let's do it. All right, thanks,
Cool.
everybody.
Go subscribe. Thank you.